A small, dusty shop tucked between newer, shinier businesses, a relic of another time, a place where music wasn't just streamed, but held in your hands. Once, it had been alive. A hub for crate diggers, hip-hop heads, and collectors who knew the value of vinyl. But now, it was fading. The owner, a man who had spent his entire life surrounded by records, by sound, by history, sat behind the counter, staring at bills he couldn't pay, at shelves filled with albums that no one was buying anymore. He had seen it coming. Had fought to keep the doors open, to keep the music alive. But today, he was thinking about locking up for the last time. Then, the bell above the door rang. And when he looked up, Snoop Dogg was standing in his shop. And what happened next? Nobody saw it coming. The shop had been there longer than most of the businesses on the block. It had survived trends, survived recessions, survived the era when CDs replaced vinyl, and even when digital streaming made owning music almost unnecessary. But survival wasn't enough anymore. Because now, the shop was empty. The owner, an old-school vinyl lover named Reggie, sat behind the counter, flipping through the same stack of unpaid bills he had been staring at for weeks. He had fought for years to keep this place alive, but the fight was wearing him down. The rent was past due. Sales had slowed to almost nothing. And today, he was ready to admit defeat. Until the bell above the door jingled. And when he looked up, he didn't just see a customer. He saw Snoop Dogg. The moment Snoop Dogg stepped inside, it felt like walking into the past. The air smelled like old vinyl, faded posters lined the walls, and the wooden floor creaked under his sneakers, just like the record stores he used to visit as a kid. But this wasn't the same. Because back then, these places were full of life. People flipping through crates, debating which album was the best, DJs looking for the perfect sample, kids saving up their money just to buy a new tape or CD. Now, the only sound in the store was the hum of a ceiling fan and the low crackle of an old radio playing in the background. No customers. No excitement. Just a place that had been left behind by time. And behind the counter? A man who looked like he had been left behind with it. Reggie had owned this store for over 30 years. He had watched hip-hop rise, watched legends go from underground to mainstream, watched kids grow up in his shop, spending hours discovering music that changed their lives. He had lived through the golden era of vinyl, the cassette boom, the CD takeover, but streaming? Streaming had wiped him out. The same people who used to line up outside his store for new releases now just pulled out their phones, tapped a screen, and had any song they wanted in an instant. And just like that, his store stopped being necessary. Now, it was just here. And every day, it got a little harder to keep the doors open. Reggie didn't need to say a word. Snoop could see it all over him. The tired look in his eyes, the way his hands rested on the counter like they were holding up more than just his weight, the stack of unopened mail sitting next to the register, mostly overdue bills. "Damn, OG," Snoop said, scanning the empty shop. "Ain't seen a record store this quiet since, man, I don't even know." Reggie sighed, shaking his head. "Ain't like it used to be, nephew. Used to have a line out that door every Friday. Now, I'm lucky if I get more than 3 people in a day." He didn't need to say it. Snoop already knew what was coming next. "I'm thinking it might be time to close up shop." Snoop didn't answer right away. Didn't say the usual, "Man, you can't do that." Didn't try to hit Reggie with false hope. He just let the words sit there. Because he knew. He knew how much Reggie had fought to keep this place alive, how hard he had tried to adapt, how much he loved this shop, but love didn't pay the rent. And right now, Reggie was a man looking at the end of a dream. And Snoop wasn't about to let that happen. Snoop glanced around. At the rows of untouched records. At the classic albums that had shaped his life. At the empty space where customers should have been. And then, an idea hit him. A crazy idea. The kind of idea that could change everything. He pulled out his phone, turned on Instagram Live, and pointed the camera straight at Reggie. "Ayo, world, listen up," Snoop said, his voice filling the quiet shop. "Y'all see this man right here? This is Reggie. He been holding it down, keeping the culture alive, running this record store since before half y'all even knew what hip-hop was." Reggie blinked. What you doing, Snoop?" Snoop grinned. "I'm savon your damn store, that's what I'm doing." Snoop walked through the aisles, showing off the records, calling out classics, holding up albums that had shaped the industry. "Y'all claim y'all love music, right? Y'all say you real fans? Then why this place empty?" The comments started blowing up instantly. "Damn, that store still open? Yo, I used to go there all the time. Where's this at? I'm pulling up today." And just like that, Reggie's shop wasn't invisible anymore. It was trending. By the next morning, everything had changed. The parking lot? Full. The shop? Packed. The register? Ringing nonstop. Customers came from everywhere, old school vinyl collectors, young kids just getting into music, people who had never even been in a record store before but wanted to be part of something real. And in the middle of it all, Reggie, shaking his head, smiling for the first time in years. "Man, this is crazy." Snoop grinned. "Nah, OG. This is just the beginning." Snoop didn't just want to save the shop for a day. He wanted to make sure it never struggled again. So he called up some friends. Big names. Legends. And within weeks, the shop wasn't just a store anymore, it was an experience. Live performances. Exclusive album signings. Special vinyl releases only available at Reggie's shop. And before long, the place wasn't just surviving. It was thriving. One night, after closing, Reggie sat behind the counter, counting bills, not overdue ones, but real profit. For the first time in years, he wasn't stressing about rent. Wasn't thinking about shutting down. Wasn't wondering if he had made a mistake trying to hold onto the past. Because now, the past had come back stronger than ever. And it wasn't going anywhere. Snoop walked through the aisles one last time, nodding as he saw people flipping through records, debating albums, living the same culture that had built him. Reggie watched him, shaking his head. "You really did it, man." Snoop smirked. "Nah, OG. We did." And as he walked out, past the neon open sign, past the customers, past the music that was still spinning, one thing was clear. This store wasn't just alive. It was legendary. Reggie's record store wasn't just four walls and some dusty shelves. It was a time capsule. It was the kind of place where the walls whispered history, where every album told a story, where the air itself carried the energy of 1,000 beats, rhymes, and melodies that had passed through over the years. It had been more than just a store. It had been a meeting place, a cultural hub, a school for anyone who wanted to understand music beyond just what was on the charts. But now, it was just a quiet, forgotten relic of an era that felt like it had been erased by the convenience of a streaming button. And that was the real tragedy. There had been a time when this store was alive. The 80s and 90s? That was the golden era. Back then, kids would camp out overnight just to be the first to get their hands on a new release. Rappers and producers would spend hours digging through crates, searching for that one perfect sample that nobody else had flipped yet. DJs would hold impromptu battles right in the store, turntables spinning, crowds cheering, energy bouncing off the walls. But all of that, it had faded. And now, the only sound inside the store was the soft hum of an old radio, playing a song that nobody was there to listen to. Reggie had poured his life into this place. But passion didn't pay the rent. And month after month, the bills kept stacking higher. The utilities, the vendors, the rent that seemed to go up every year, even though sales had been going down. Reggie had fought, tried everything. He started selling rare records online, tried throwing small in-store events, even tried turning half the shop into a cafe just to bring people in. But nothing worked, because no matter what he did, he was fighting a battle against time. And time? It was winning. Reggie could still remember the faces of his regulars. The ones who used to stop by every single week, who would debate over albums, who would bring their kids in, teaching them about real music. But those faces? They weren't coming back. Some had moved away. Some had traded vinyl for convenience. Some had simply stopped buying music altogether. And the new generation? They didn't even know this place existed. Because to them, music wasn't something you bought. It was just something that played in the background while they scrolled through their phones. Reggie had one last shot. A final clearance sale. He had marked everything down, hoping that maybe, just maybe, a few collectors would come through and save him from having to shut down for good. But the sale had started 2 weeks ago. And the shelves? They were still full. It wasn't working. And now, as he sat behind the counter, staring at the numbers, staring at the bills, staring at the reality he had been trying to ignore for months, he knew what had to be done. It was time to close. For good. And then, the bell above the door rang. Reggie almost didn't look up. Because he had stopped expecting customers. Because the sound of that bell had stopped meaning anything. But when he finally glanced toward the entrance, he froze. Because standing there, in the middle of his dying record store, flipping through old vinyls like it was 1995 again, was Snoop Dogg. Reggie blinked, wondering for a second if he was dreaming. Because what were the chances? What were the odds that, on the day he was ready to close for good, one of the biggest legends in hip-hop history would walk through his doors? And the way Snoop was looking around, he wasn't just browsing. He was taking it all in. The posters, the crates, the turntables that hadn't been used in years. And when he finally walked up to the counter, still holding an old vinyl in his hand, he didn't even have to ask. He already knew. "Damn, OG," Snoop said, shaking his head. "What happened?" Reggie let out a long sigh. "Man, you know what happened." Snoop nodded, flipping the record over in his hands. He did know. Streaming happened. Convenience happened. Time happened. But still, seeing it like this, seeing a place like this, a place that had once been the heart of the culture, on the verge of shutting down, it didn't sit right. And Snoop? He wasn't the kind of man to just walk away. Snoop could have pulled out his wallet, cut Reggie a check, saved the shop with a few extra zeros. But that wasn't the solution. Because this wasn't about money. It was about making people care again. So instead, Snoop pulled out his phone, opened Instagram, and before Reggie could even ask what was happening, Snoop hit record. "Yo, what up, world? Y'all see this right here?" He turned the camera around, showing the shop, showing Reggie, showing the rows of vinyl collecting dust. "This right here? This is where the culture lives. But y'all been sleeping on it. And now, it's dying. Unless we do something about it." Reggie blinked. "Snoop, what the hell are you doing?" Snoop grinned. "About to bring your customers back, OG." By the time Snoop finished recording, the comments were already exploding. People were tagging their friends, asking for the address, talking about how they used to come here as kids, how they couldn't believe the shop was still standing, how they were pulling up ASAP. And within an hour, the first customer walked in. Then another. Then another. And just like that, the record store that was supposed to close forever had a second chance. And Snoop Dogg was just getting started. Snoop didn't even hesitate. He held up his phone, hit record, and started talking, not like a celebrity promoting a product, not like someone reading a script, but like a man who had just walked into a place that mattered. "Y'all see this right here? Y'all see this spot," he said, turning the camera around so people could take it all in, the shelves stacked with vinyl, the faded posters of hip-hop legends, the turntable in the corner that hadn't been used in years. "This ain't just a store. This is history. This is where music used to live. And now? Man, look around, this place is empty." He panned the camera to Reggie, who stood behind the counter, arms crossed, a half smile on his face, part gratitude, part disbelief, part wondering what the hell was about to happen next. "See, y'all talk about loving hip-hop, loving vinyl, loving the culture, but where y'all at? 'Cause my man Reggie here? He been holding it down for 30 years. And now? He about to shut this place down 'cause ain't nobody coming through no more." He let the words sit. Let the silence stretch. Then, with that classic Snoop smirk, he said, "We gon' change that. Right now." And with one tap, the post went live. The video hit thousands of views in minutes. Then hundreds of thousands. Then, it exploded. The comment section was flooded. "Wait. I used to go there as a kid. That store is still open? Damn, this place was legendary. I thought it shut down years ago. I'm pulling up today. Where's the address?" And just like that, Reggie's store wasn't forgotten anymore. It was alive. Within hours, the video had been shared by other artists, DJs, producers, record collectors, people who had spent their lives searching for rare vinyl, people who knew what a place like this meant. A radio station picked it up. Then a hip-hop blog. Then a national news outlet. And before Reggie could even process what was happening, the whole country was talking about his store. And not just talking. People were showing up. By the next morning, Reggie was standing behind the counter, rubbing his eyes, wondering if he was still dreaming. Because the store that had been empty for months now had a line out the door. Customers were flooding in, old heads looking for classics, young kids wanting to own their first vinyl, collectors searching for hidden gems, people who didn't even own a record player but wanted to be part of the movement. And in the middle of it all, Reggie, shaking his head, a grin spreading across his face. "This is crazy, man," he muttered, ringing up another sale. But crazy was just the beginning. Snoop didn't just bring in customers. He brought in the culture. Within a week, hip-hop legends started pulling up. Old-school DJs came by to dig through crates. Rappers who had built their careers off samples from vinyl found in places like this showed up to support. Even new artists, the ones raised in the digital age, came just to experience what it was like to hold music in their hands. And suddenly, Reggie's store wasn't just surviving. It was thriving. Reggie had never cared about fame. But now, everyone wanted to talk to him. Interviews, articles, podcasts, they all wanted to know how a failing record store went from almost closing to being one of the most talked about places in music. And every time they asked, Reggie just shrugged and said the same thing. "Man, Snoop Dogg walked in my shop, hit record, and changed my life." A few weeks later, Snoop had another idea. "Yo, Reggie, you ever had a live show in here?" Reggie laughed. "Man, this ain't no concert hall." Snoop just smiled. "It is now." And that night, the store transformed. The shelves were pushed back. Speakers were brought in. And before long, the first live performance in Reggie's shop was happening right in the middle of the aisles. People packed inside, records spinning, the bass shaking the walls. It felt like the old days again. And for the first time in years, Reggie wasn't thinking about closing. he was thinking about what was next. It didn't stop at one viral post, or one good week of sales, or even one concert. Because now, the store had become a movement. It was more than just a shop. It was a place where hip-hop, R&B, jazz, funk, soul, and everything in between could live forever. A place where kids could learn about music history. A place where vinyl wasn't just an old-school thing, it was the foundation of something timeless. And people weren't just coming in to buy records anymore. They were coming to experience something real. Reggie had spent years thinking about the end. Thinking about what he would do if the store shut down. Thinking about how he would pack up his life's work, how he would walk away from something that had been more than just a job, it had been his purpose. But now he didn't have to. Because his store wasn't just open. It was thriving. And for the first time in years, when he thought about the future, he wasn't afraid of it anymore. Snoop didn't just save a store. He didn't just help an old friend. He didn't just go viral. He brought something back. He reminded people that music isn't just files on a phone. That hip-hop isn't just about streaming numbers and chart positions. That some things, real things, can't be replaced. And as he stood outside the store, watching the line of customers, watching Reggie laugh behind the counter, watching the music come back to life, he nodded to himself and smiled. "Yeah," he muttered. "That's how you do it." And just like that, the past had a future again. For years, Reggie thought about closing. Thought about the going out of business sign he'd have to hang in the window. Thought about how he'd have to pack up the records, box up the memories, and walk away from the shop that had been his life. But now he wasn't thinking about closing. Now he was thinking about how to handle all the people flooding in. Because since the day Snoop Dogg walked through that door, his store had gone from an empty relic to a movement. And there was no stopping it now. It started as a trickle. A few customers here and there. People who saw Snoop's video and wanted to check the place out. Then the trickle became a rush. Then the rush became a wave. Then, the wave turned into something even bigger. People weren't just coming in to browse anymore. They were coming to buy. Vinyl sales exploded. Rare records that had been collecting dust for years, gone within hours. And the best part? They weren't just buying, they were talking. Talking about the albums, the samples, the hidden gems. Talking about music the way people used to before everything became digital. Talking about why a store like this needed to exist. And Reggie? He was selling out faster than he could restock. One afternoon, as Reggie stood behind the counter, ringing up another customer with a line stretching out the door, the bell above the entrance jingled. And when he looked up, Snoop Dogg was standing there again. This time, he wasn't alone. This time, he had brought company. A group of artists, producers, and DJs, some old school legends, some rising stars. People who understood exactly what a place like this meant. And in that moment, Reggie knew. This wasn't just a store anymore. It was a movement. That night, Snoop had an idea. "We gotta do something special, OG," he said, looking around the store. "This place deserves more than just sales. It deserves a celebration." Reggie raised an eyebrow. "What kind of celebration we talking?" Snoop grinned. "We 'bout to throw the biggest in-store event this city ever seen." And before Reggie could even respond, Snoop was already on the phone. Word spread faster than wildfire. A pop-up concert. In a record store. With Snoop Dogg. And some of the biggest names in hip-hop history. The city hadn't seen anything like it. By the time the night arrived, the line stretched down the entire block. People weren't just waiting to see Snoop. They were waiting to experience something real. And when the doors opened, the energy was electric. Turntables spun. MCs grabbed the mic. The bass rattled the shelves, shaking dust off records that had been sitting untouched for years. And for the first time in decades, the shop felt like a movement again. Legends performed. New artists made their debut. Fans rapped along to classics. And in the middle of it all, Reggie stood behind the counter, shaking his head, grinning from ear to ear. Because this wasn't just a good night. This was history. The next morning, something happened that even Snoop hadn't expected. A reporter from a major news outlet called. Then another. Then another. Everyone wanted to know the story. How did an almost forgotten record store go from the brink of shutting down to being one of the most talked about places in music? And just like that, Reggie's shop wasn't just a business anymore. It was a cultural landmark. For years, nobody cared about record stores. Nobody wanted to invest in vinyl. Nobody thought these places had a future. But now, the same people who had once ignored Reggie's store were lining up to be part of it. Sponsors wanted to collaborate. Brands wanted to host events. Artists wanted to drop exclusive vinyls only available at Reggie's shop. And for the first time in his life, Reggie wasn't worried about rent anymore. He was thinking about expansion. A few weeks after the event, Snoop called Reggie. Yo, OG. You ever think about opening a second shop? Reggie chuckled. Man, you crazy. I can barely believe I still got this one. But Snoop wasn't joking. Nah, I'm serious. This ain't just a store no more. It's a movement. And movements? They grow. And that's when Reggie realized Snoop wasn't just saving his business. He was building something bigger. Something that couldn't be stopped. Something that would outlive both of them. There had been a time when Reggie thought about shutting down. Thought about walking away. Thought about locking the door for the last time. But now he had something more than a business. He had a legacy. And no matter what happened next, that store wasn't going anywhere. Because hip-hop wasn't just music. It was history. And now, thanks to Snoop Dogg, it had a home. Forever. Reggie's shop wasn't just a record store anymore. It was a destination. People traveled from all over just to step inside, to dig through crates, to be part of something real. Artists started dropping exclusive vinyls, only available at Reggie's. Big-name DJs hosted live sets in the aisles, spinning records on the same turntables that had once collected dust. Collectors, hip-hop heads, and even young kids who had never owned a vinyl before came through, wanting to experience music the way it was meant to be heard. And the craziest part? It never slowed down. Because this wasn't just hype. This was history being reborn. For years, Reggie had braced himself for the worst. He had spent so much time preparing for the day he would have to shut the doors for good that it took him a while to realize he didn't have to anymore. One evening, as he was closing up, he stood in the middle of the store, surrounded by shelves that weren't empty, by a business that wasn't dying, by a future that wasn't uncertain. And for the first time in a long time, he let himself believe it. He had won. Not just against time. Not just against streaming. But against the idea that places like this didn't matter anymore. Because they did. And now, thanks to Snoop, the whole world knew it. Snoop Dogg didn't just save a store. He didn't just bring back vinyl. He reminded people of something they had forgotten. That music isn't just something you stream. It's something you feel. It's something you hold. It's something that lasts. And as long as people kept coming, kept buying, kept talking about what this store meant, it was never going to disappear again. Because now, Reggie's shop wasn't just a business. It was a part of hip-hop history. Forever.